Happy Wednesday. We are going to be reading chapter 4 of Mysteries According to Humphrey for our One School, One Book Challenge. Chapter 4 is The Case of the Curious Clues. Once the room was quiet, I hopped on my wheel and spun as fast as my legs would go. Spinning helps me think, and I had a lot of thinking to do. I waited and waited for Aldo to come in and clean. Maybe he would tell me what had happened. Suddenly, I was blinded, and Aldo's voice boomed. "Hey, buddies, how's it going?" "Things are unsqueakably bad," I told him as my eyes adjusted to the lights. Aldo wheeled his cleaning cart into room 26 and toward our table. "I guess you heard about Mrs. Brisbane," he said, looking down into my cage. What happened?" I screeched. Aldo shook his head. "Who'd have thought? I don't have to tell you what I think of Mrs. Brisbane. She inspired me to want to be a teacher. Aldo goes to school in the daytime so he can teach school someday. He's an excellent cleaner, but I think he'll be a great teacher too. Like I said to Maria, boy, you never know what's going to happen next." Maria was Aldo's wife and a special human to me. "I don't even know what happened today," I tried to tell him. I know, he said. "You miss her." Then Aldo went to work. Usually I love to watch him clean. He sweeps and swoops. He dusts and polishes. He hums and sings and sometimes does a dance. But he was quieter that night. Oh, he did get the room very clean, but there was no humming, singing, or dancing. Every once in a while he'd stop, shake and mumble, "What a thing to happen." Or, "You just never know." I certainly didn't know what was going on, and I wished someone would tell me. When he was finished, Aldo took out a sandwich and his thermos of coffee and sat in front of Og and me. He usually had his dinner break with us, and he always remembered to bring me veggies. "Here you go, Humphrey, old pal," he said as he pushed a sweet celery stick into my cage. Thanks, I squeaked. Then he dropped a fishy frog stick into Og's tank. My neighbor splashed happily. "Hey, I was thinking about that Sherlock Holmes book," Aldo said. "I think I'm going to read that story about the redhead again." "Read it now," I begged him. "Please." But Aldo just ate and packed up his cleaning supplies and wheeled his cart out of room 26. "You two have a good night," he said as he switched off the lights. I was disappointed to see him go. It might be a long time before I had the chance to hear the end of that story. But after I had thought about it some more, I decided to take things into my own paws. When I saw the lights of Aldo's car leave the parking lot near my window, I jiggled the lock that doesn't lock and opened my cage. First, I needed to talk to Og. I was thinking, if we knew how Sherlock Holmes solved a mystery, maybe we could solve our mystery, I squeaked. "Boing, boing?" Og twanged. "I mean the mystery of what happened to Miss Brisbane," I explained patiently. I try hard to be patient with Og, because frogs don't always think like hamsters. I guess they wouldn't, since we're a different species. "Don't worry, Og," I said. "I have a plan." Aldo had very kindly left the blinds open, so the streetlight outside lit up the room inside. I moved to the edge of the table and grabbed onto the leg. Taking a deep breath, I glided down. I've done it many times before. It's thrilling and slightly scary and definitely dangerous. Once I hit the floor, I scurried over to Mrs. Brisbane's desk. That desk is extremely tall from a hamster's eye view. I had another lucky break. Mrs. Brisbane's chair was pushed close to the drawers of her desk, so getting to the big red book on top wouldn't be too difficult. I stood on my tippy toes and reached up to grab the bar between the chair legs. I used every ounce of strength I could to pull myself up. Then I grabbed the next highest bar and, whoof, pulled myself up again. All the exercise I would get spinning my wheel and rolling in my hamster ball has made me a super strong hamster. Those veggies helped too. Next, I grabbed onto the arm of the chair and inched my way up to the seat. Whew, I was so tired. My whiskers were wilting, but I was only halfway to my goal. Og sent me some encouraging boing boings. I rested for a few seconds, then reached up again, grabbed the edge of the desk, pulled myself up, and threw myself on top of the desk. Whew! Og splashed excitedly. After I caught my breath, I hurried over to the big book with the thick red cover. Along the side, in big black letters, it read, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I felt a little shiver as I looked at the picture of the great man with his deer stalker hat. Boing, 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 Og called impatiently. Okay, I'm going to open the book, I squeaked back. We'll find out how to be detectives soon. I reached up to the edge to touch the edge of the top cover. Oomph! I pushed hard with both paws. Nothing happened. I pushed again, harder. Nothing happened again. It's very heavy, Og, I squeaked, but I was so out of breath I'm not sure he could hear me. I wish there weren't quite so many stories about Sherlock Holmes. When I failed to budge the cover a third time, I decided to try something else. I looked around the desktop and saw a pencil. Maybe I could use that to push the cover open. I rolled it over to the book, propped it up under the cover, and gave it a mighty push. It pushed right back, I guess, and I fell backward. The pencil rolled off the edge of the desk. I hate to think what would have happened if I'd rolled off the edge. As I tried to catch my breath, I heard Og splashing wildly. Boing, 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 boing! I'm all right, Og, I called to him, but I can't get the book open. I'm not one to give up easily. But I was exhausted, and I knew it wouldn't be long before school began. It hadn't been a successful night, but it would be even worse if I got caught outside my cage. So I slid down the side of my desk, much faster than I'd climbed up. I raced across the floor and grabbed onto the long cord that hangs down from the blinds. Then came that hard part where I had to swing back and forth, higher and higher until I was level with the top of the table. I let go and slid across the table, past Og's tank, right up to the door of my cage. I made it, Og, I told my friend. Boing! He sounded relieved. I was planning on a nice doze when I got back in my cage, but when I closed my eyes and was about to drift off, I remembered Mrs. Brisbane saying, "A clue is information that helps you solve a mystery. Sherlock Holmes is very good at finding clues." I didn't just remember her words. I could hear them in my tiny ears. I jumped up and raced to the side of my cage. Og, Mrs. Brisbane said to look for clues. Let's see if we have any clues of what happened to her. I grabbed the tiny notebook Miss Mack had gave me long ago and the teeny pencil that goes along with it. I keep it well hidden behind the mirror in my cage. I opened it and began to write. Clue number 1. Mrs. Brisbane didn't plan to be absent. The day before, she said, "See you in the morning." Clue number 2. Mr. Morales didn't know Mrs. Brisbane would be absent. He said they were trying to reach her. That's why he took over the class until they could get a substitute. Whatever happened was unexpected. Clue 3. Mrs. Wright said she was sure Mrs. Brisbane would be back tomorrow. But later in the day, Miss Mack and Mr. Morales both said she might be out for a while. So the story changed as the day went on. Clue 4. Aldo seems worried that something happened to Mrs. Brisbane, and that makes me unsqueakably worried too. My paw started shaking, so I quit writing. I wondered if Sherlock Holmes was ever as worried as I was that morning. Miss Swift unlocked the door to let Mr. E in. He had on a button with a big smiley face, and his big cloth bag looked even fuller than it had the day before. Once my fellow classmates arrived, Mr. Morales came in. His tie for the day had little red birds on it. "Class, your families were all notified last night about Mrs. Brisbane," he said. "As you know, Mr. E will be taking over." My friends all looked perfectly happy, but I was not. Principal Morales might have told all the families about Mrs. Brisbane last night, but nobody told me. Would Mr. E be taking over just for now, or would it be forever? I was so worried. I could hardly concentrate on our classwork that morning. Not that there was much. Mr. E started off the day by having all the students share their jokes. That was their homework, after all. My friend's jokes were pretty funny. Hurry Up Harry had a good one. Why does a stork stand on one leg? He asked. His answer? Because if it raised both legs, it would fall down. And Rolling Rosie made everyone groan when she asked, What's brown and sticky? A stick. Phoebe forgot to bring a joke. But I know one, she said. What do you say to a crying whale? Quit your blubbering. Everyone seemed so happy. I began to think maybe nothing bad had happened to Mrs. Brisbane after all. Maybe she had just gone on vacation. But then I remembered her saying, See you in the morning. I've learned enough about humans to know that they don't leave on vacations without planning ahead. Especially a human like Mrs. Brisbane. Now here is a little tip from Humphrey's dictionary. Clues can make you worry, worry, worry.